was on the other side. So I walked over there. And by the time we came around again, I almost felt like I was so disoriented. Where was the White House? So we eventually made it to the gate that we needed to access to get into the east wing of the White House. And we met with staffers there to discuss an upcoming project that we'll be releasing through nationalcenter.org and Project 21. I'll just give you the briefest of previews, which is that it's called The Blueprint. And it's something that we are so excited about here, just because it has implications that will reach in and kind of dovetail nicely with the conference that's coming up for Urban Family Talk. So Urban Family Talk's having a conference, and we're going to talk more about that. You can register at urbanfamilytalk.com. It's going to be held in Tupelo, Mississippi. We have some wonderful headliners. You can see everything, who's going to be there, who's speaking, which radio host, et cetera, right there at urbanfamilytalk.com. Just check it out. And of course, the discounted pricing for a ticket ends on May the 1st, and you have to pay the full price, which is, you have a nice little discount there if you want to get in early. And there's a simultaneous conference that'll be going on for kids. So if you have kids and you're thinking, what am I going to do on a Saturday? Well, you can bring your kids along and they can have some really great content that's geared towards their age group while you partake of the adult content, meaning discussions among Christian leaders about marriage and family here in the United States. We have some fantastic panels that are going to be going on. So today on the show, what are we going to be talking about? Well, we've got a Smallville actress. So if you're like me, you maybe have seen part of one episode of Smallville, or have you even seen it at all? I'm not ashamed to admit I've never seen a whole episode. I just don't think that the current crop of Hollywood writers can do the storyline of Superman any justice. I mean, I even saw the battle between, it was Superman versus Batman, and that movie was okay. But I have to tell you, the storytelling that went on before, the interest they were able to garner, the way they were able to lock you into the story, they just don't have that gift in Hollywood anymore. And so when they have these TV shows that are spinoffs, I give them about 5 minutes and I'm never able, they can't hold me. They can't hold my attention. So I've never seen Smallville, but this is actually not about the movie side. This is just the fact that she is an actress or was an actress on that show. Her name, Allison Mack. She's under investigation for sex trafficking, for luring women into this group that she was in, and then coercing them into having sexual relations and kind of almost a captive type of a thing with the guy who was her leader, as she called him. So we'll talk about that a little bit. A premature baby was left to die alone in a sluice room in Great Britain. And we're going to talk about that because while the Democrats are no longer on their single payer kick, they're still on it. They're just not talking about it. We have Angela Morabito, senior campaign organizer for StandUnited.org. She's going to join us. And we're also going to talk about China having this social score. Now, we have our credit scores here in the U.S., but all that does is it means, it's not that you can't borrow money. It's that you might have to pay more to borrow money if your credit score is not good. In China, they're using something called a social score to stop their citizens from using planes and now trains. And they plan to roll it out to the entirety of their over 1 billion citizens. Basically, they're saying if you pay your taxes late, things like that, you might have trouble doing the most basic of things in their country. It's totalitarianism. It's crazy, but we're going to talk about it. So we heard Sean Spicer talking about his new book and how sad it is that Jim Acosta ridicules American people and that they still haven't gotten the lesson. I think it is sad, but it's not sad for us. It's not sad for people who want to see the Democrats kept out of power, because as long as they're talking this way about Americans, deplorables, people who can't understand, people who can't string thoughts together, they're losing. Americans who are being described in that way are not going to vote for them. So he then goes on to describe the bad stories, bad narratives, and false information that are spread by organizations, or I should say people who work for organizations like CNN. And it's number 7.
I think when folks in these big urban areas who have been sort of around an elite group of people in the media or in Wall Street finally get to understand what's going on in rural America, the troubles that they feel, the way they feel that they've been left behind, and why this president is addressing their concerns is important. So for Jim not to understand that, and for him to continue to dismiss and frankly make fun of and ridicule people around this country is really sad, and really shows you how little of an understanding they have of what's happening in this country.
They still think they're saving America from the president.
I know.
That's
again, I don't mind that from a liberal activist. I get it. I've been doing this a long time. But when you have a purported...
He's the White House
correspondent saying that the people don't get it. That's a problem. And when you're further insulting them, saying that they don't have their faculties, I wasn't attacking Jim. Frankly, I was attacking the premise of bad stories, bad narratives, false information. And I continue to believe that that's important, because I believe in a fair and, I believe in the First Amendment. I believe in a robust press, but I don't believe that false narratives should go unanswered. And I think the lack of his understanding of what's happening in this country is still a fundamental problem with so many people in the mainstream elite media.
So, of course, Jim Acosta is already out there saying that his comments about hostility that journalists face from regular Americans have been twisted by some outlets. And I don't think it's a twisting at all. Jim Acosta was speaking to Variety. They did a really big, splashy interview with him. And he really kind of covered a lot of different topics. And that's what these interviews are for. It's like a wide-ranging expose that gives a person a chance to comment on a number of different topical areas. And it's important for him to own it. Like, if you're going to say that kind of stuff about Americans, own it. Not all Americans are threatening journalists, but there is a lack of respect towards journalists that, that's a personal problem. And when we see it on a larger scale, you have to attribute that to, obviously the personal decisions that people are making, and then they're responding to something. Americans aren't just making up what they feel about journalists out of nothing. They're watching journalists skew the news and become the news and be a part of the news, which Jim Acosta is totally guilty of. For someone who works for such a huge news organization like CNN, for him to come out there constantly and make the questions when he's in the White House, in the briefing room, he talks to Sarah Sanders as if they've had a relationship and now they're broken up. That's how he questions her. Sometimes it's like she's his aunt or his mom or his best friend's mom or something. And he's both whiny and petulant. And then he just add in a certain bit of, like, you kind of wonder, what's the relationship? Did they ever know each other before this? That's how he approaches her. It's unprofessional, and it makes people dislike him. Now, instead of him owning that and changing his demeanor towards her, he's now blaming just Americans at large, but specifically people who voted for Donald Trump. He's blaming all of us for how he feels people don't like journalists anymore. So this is a multifaceted problem, and it's not something that I feel is appropriate for him to foist off on some of the rest of us. Like own your own behavior, Jim. You're combative. You attack Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Before her, you relished your jousting sessions with Spicer. So at this point, you can't have it both ways. You are not both the victim and the victor, because he liked to say that he'd bested, the press secretary on occasion. He likes to try to make it seem as if he's gotten in some points or he's made some, fantastic effort against them. But now he's a victim. So there was this clip, and that's what you heard a little bit of that in the first clip, where it was Steve Doocy on Fox and Friends. They've got Sean Spicer on there. They played the clip for him. And then in the clip, Acosta says they don't have all their faculties in some cases. Their elevator might not hit all floors. So in other words, the president and his supporters suffer from mental deficiencies. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't people who have mental deficiencies who also vote for the Republicans, just like there may be the same types of individuals who vote for Democrats. That's a distinct possibility in a country of over 300 million people, that someone who is not mentally 100% would be voting for any party, really, honestly, because they don't make you take a psychological evaluation before you pull the voting lever. So anyone can be voting for anyone. But the insinuation here from Jim Acosta, let's not act like we don't see what he's saying. What he's saying is, well, those deplorable Republican voters also, they may not have, all of their senses. Now, I regularly use those kinds of characterizations for people who send hateful mail to me. If you threaten me, I'm going to think to myself, well, this person must not be 100%, because why would you threaten someone you've never met over something they said? It's just not, or something they wrote. It doesn't make sense to me. And I do think it is the behavior of someone who's not 100%. And so if he's making that kind of a comparison, I can understand it. People shouldn't threaten Jim Acosta because he goes into the press briefing room and is rude and disrespectful to Sarah Huckabee Sanders. You'll never hear me advocate for that kind of foolishness. But are you telling me that just because someone voted for the party that you don't like, now they don't have all of their mental faculties? Well, that's something different, isn't it? So, and during the interaction there, they were talking about Sean Spicer's upcoming book, which is entitled The Briefing. And he says that in the briefing, Sean Spicer says in the briefing, the book, that Jim Acosta features heavily. And it's a memoir of his 6 months as White House press secretary. I would imagine Acosta would feature heavily since they spoke to each other almost every day, and Jim Acosta was rude like 100% of the time. Are journalists under attack in this country? I don't even know if I'm willing to debate that. They probably are. But so are people who aren't journalists like myself. So are people who just write columns. Everyone's attacking everyone. The answer is to improve our behavior. Everyone. So I don't think Jim Acosta is going to change his behavior. Do you? That's why he's there. He's a disturber. All right. When we get back, we'll have some audio from Andrea Mitchell and more Stacey on the Right. Stay there.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. A couple of months ago, I told you about the Show Up Tour coming up to Washington, D.C. and Mount Vernon in September. And the Show Up Tour means all you got to do is show up to Washington, D.C., and we will take care of the rest. That is the Spiritual Heritage Tour in the fall, and we're almost sold out. You will love this tour if you've never been to our nation's capital. We're going to see it from a distinctively Christian perspective and a historically accurate perspective. Stephen McDowell of the Providence Foundation will be joining us to give talks all along the way. We're also going to Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown on a separate tour, just preceding the Washington, D.C. tour if you want to do both. So for all the information on the September Show Up Tour, go to spiritualheritagetours.com. That's spiritualheritagetours.com.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. I'll never forget the shock and fear that hit my family when my oldest sister, Elena, was diagnosed with an aggressive form of breast cancer. We truly wrestled with fear. Thoughts like, are we going to lose her? How long does she have? What's the prognosis? All of these questions crowded out our other more mundane concerns. More often than not, fear is our first response to life's crises and challenges. Fear is born out of uncertainty. It's a sense of danger. Things are not predictable. We don't see this coming. We haven't been through this before. We don't know what's going to happen, and it strikes fear in our hearts. You know what? We must reject fear's paralyzing control. Listen to these tender instructions from Psalm 34, verses 4 through 7. I sought the Lord, and he answered me and delivered me from all my fears. They looked to him and were radiant. Their faces shall never be ashamed. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and rescues them. You see, when fear strikes our hearts, number one, we need to stop and seek the Lord. The psalmist says, I sought the Lord. Seek God right now. Ask for his special presence in your predicament. Then secondly, embrace his concern. Verse 6 says, the poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all his troubles. Finally, draw strength from his presence. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and rescues them. He'll strengthen you to face whatever danger you fear. Here's what I want you to remember today. God is with you, and he is greater than all your fears. No matter what you're facing, he is with you.
Join Crawford Loritz tomorrow for another Legacy Moment.
Welcome back to Stacey on the Right on Urban Family Talk. going through the book, I had a little bit of PTSD.
I thought you might.
Just thinking about the bus and the plane and the food and being dissed by the first woman to be a major party nominee and an almost all-female press corps. And we have, I think, a good photo of all of us in happier times at the beginning of the campaign. I think we're in Las Vegas when we all posed for a Politico picture of the almost all-female press corps, if we've got that handy. And then to find how little access, I mean, we actually look groomed, which was a rarity as the campaign progressed.
You do,
and you
I
were
don't.
on it from the beginning. And, you know, just the fact that we had so little access. My takeaway was that she was so buttoned down because of the email controversy and because of us and our editors really wanting to go after that, and of course Trump egging everybody on, that she felt that her policy questions were never getting covered and that all we wanted to ask her about were the emails.
Right, of course. I mean, I would go back further than that to the in the 90s, that I think her positions towards exactly, you were there, and I think that scar tissue built up between Hillary Clinton and the media never went away, and certainly was exacerbated by the private email server the scandal that broke right before she declared. And so we started in this defensive crouch, and absolutely, and I think even when policy stories were covered, and we did cover them, they weren't necessarily breaking through. They weren't what was getting eyeballs and traffic and on, you know, driving the news. So it was such a contentious relationship, and it was she had, as you said, this historically all-female press corps, and you had a female candidate that didn't want a lot to do with us.
So, wow. Welcome back to Stacey on the Right. It's not often that I get a little perplexed to the point where it's hard to react. But I'm sorry. Can they be any more in their own little world? Can they inhabit a space that's so exclusive that only they can understand the feelings that they have any more than they already do? Do you listen to them talking about themselves and how they feel and how they experienced the campaign and kind of feel like, I'm sorry, who cares? Who cares how you guys didn't have any sleep and you guys were like, is that not your job? Isn't that why they pay you the big bucks to fly around on planes with presidential candidates and to have this insider access to a part of the American experience that all the rest of us will never, ever get to touch? And so instead of complaining about it, how about just acknowledging the exclusivity of the group of people that you now are a part of? And for Andrea Mitchell has been a part of for decades, in that she has been around the most powerful people in our country in their most, the tiredness, the vulnerable moments, all of those things. And they've gotten to observe and to report back to the American people. And instead of doing so in a nonpartisan, upright, upstanding, journalistic way, they've chosen to, on every opportunity, place their own ideology above that of the people that they're supposed to be serving, that they're supposed to be giving information to. And the reporting has always been skewed. So it's Andrea Mitchell. Obviously, they're on MSNBC, and they're talking about, how they were complicit in shifting attention away from the Access Hollywood tape. And this is back in 2016. They were talking, instead of talking about the Access Hollywood tape, which was irrelevant. It occurred before the president was a candidate and before he was president of the United States. So it is irrelevant. Why do I say that? Because that was the same argument that was made about the behavior of Bill Clinton and his sexual aggression. Well, that happened back when he was governor. That's already been covered. Well, that happened before he was president. That's already been covered. Well, that happened back when Bill Clinton was the president, and we're talking about Hillary. Do you see how it's always appropriate to deflect when it's a Democrat? But if it's a Republican, well, back when they were 6, they sneezed and didn't, hand sanitize. They sneezed into their hand instead of their elbow and didn't hand sanitize. So, we got to investigate that. Who was present when the 5-year-old then child Trump sneezed? Now, you might think, well, having an extramarital affair is more serious than sneezing improperly and potentially spreading the cold virus. But is that what the Democrats think? It was never appropriate to talk about Chappaquiddick and Mary Jo Kopechne and how she was killed by the Lion of the Senate. It was never appropriate to talk about that. He's dead, and people are still like, how can you impugn the character of the Lion of the Senate? Well, it's pretty easy. We're not impugning his character. We're just talking about what happened. And it was never allowed to be brought up, never allowed to be a major story, hushed up at every opportunity when he was actually alive. Same thing with the governor in the state of Missouri. We're talking about an extramarital affair that happened before he was elected governor. But it's all people care about because they got to get rid of that guy. He's too pro-life. He's not just pro-life like, I'm going to talk about being pro-life. He's actually pro-life. He's going after it with a vengeance. He's trying to protect the unborn and the women who are victimized by abortion. And he's got the Republicans arrayed against him, the Democrats, and they all want him gone. So you've got Andrea Mitchell. She's on MSNBC. She's talking to New York Times reporter Amy Chozick. Amy Chozick covered the Clinton campaign during the 2016 year, and they're discussing what Chozick thought of the press covering the Podesta emails right after the Access Hollywood tape of Donald Trump and Billy Bush came out. And so the insinuation here is that they feel like it wasn't covered. They feel like it was not covered, right? So instead of everybody talking about the Access Hollywood tape, people were talking about the Podesta emails. Now, I'll tell you why I was talking about the Podesta emails as opposed to the Access Hollywood tape. I could care less what Donald Trump and Billy Bush discussed in some hallway or trailer or someplace back when they were on television as reality show stars. But the Podesta emails were actually new information. When I say new information, who doesn't recall how we were all reading them in the WikiLeaks cables? And my mouth was just dropped open on the continual basis. First of all, his password was password. How much do you laugh about that? Second of all, dude was pretty brutal in his communications about any number of topics. It was the best bad stuff. It was. And if it had been Republicans, if it had been some Republicans' email that had been, exposed by WikiLeaks, you better believe the Democrats would have covered it 24/7. And so would all of their media outlets. The fact that this was covered is not because it was a deflection away from the Billy Bush tapes or that it was against Hillary Clinton. It's because it was news. Here's some news for them. It was news. So Mitchell asked Chozick, what are your feelings? I see them in the book and how unwittingly complicit we were afterwards on that horrible day. The Access Hollywood tape comes out, and then right away the Podesta emails are dumped by WikiLeaks, and everybody chased after it. And Chozick replies, at the time I did what every news organization did. I covered them. We contextualized them. We tried to make sure they were accurate. But then about a month after the election, I was on the subway on the way to work and read a Pulitzer-winning story by my colleagues about how the Russians pulled off the perfect hack to interfere with our democracy. And it said turning the media organizations, including the Times, into de facto agents of Russian intelligence. That's what her colleagues wrote. That is not fact. Because the Russians, as we've covered here on the program before, and if you're first tuning into this program today, I'm going to say this for posterity's sake because it has to be said. The Russians weren't interested in a Hillary Clinton or a Donald Trump presidency. They didn't care which one it was. They were interested in turning American citizens against each other, and they were successful in doing that because we trust each other even less now than we ever have in the entirety of the history of this country. And so the Democrats want to blame Russians and Russian intelligence and hackers. They want to blame them for Hillary Clinton's loss. Hillary owns her own loss. But what they're not discussing is the fact that every time they mention the fact that the Russians impacted the election, the Russians elected Trump, the hackers are pretty happy about that because they're getting credit for something they didn't do. They were effective at hacking. They did expose a lot of things that were embarrassing to Democrats, but it was not the fact that they hacked the Democrats that was the problem. It's what was in their emails. Now, nobody wants their private emails published. This is not about not respecting privacy. What the Russian hackers did was wrong. But what they were trying to do was to sow seeds of mistrust between Americans. And so if you read that one political party thinks that one segment of the population needs taco bowl engagement, that another segment of the society policies don't work on the Black community. That's what was in the WikiLeaks cables. Democrats emailed back and forth amongst themselves that they had to go after the Latino demographic because there were no policy solutions that work for Blacks. Black people can't be helped. And do you know why Democrats think that? Because they've been trying to help Black people in America for what, 50, 60 years now? They've been in control of the inner cities and they've driven them into the ground. Instead of owning their failure and admitting that their big government anti-family policies don't work, they're just going to stick with it. The fact that they maintain such a high level of allegiance from Black voters, to them, it's neither here nor there. They're owed those votes. They've taken all of the hits. They're martyrs for the Black community, which is why they've turned to the LGBT. And now that they've gotten gay marriage established in this country as the law of the land, they're turning to the transgenders. And once they fixed it so a woman isn't a woman and a man isn't a man, they'll turn to someone else. In fact, they already are. It's refugees and people from south of the border, but not DACA recipients, because notice how they don't talk about that anymore. When they were given the opportunity to legalize the DACA recipients, they didn't do it. So on every metric, Democrats have failed all of their constituency groups. They get laws passed on behalf of them. They get dispensation from the government. They increase the size of government and they raise the taxes. But in the areas that they control, where they have unfettered control and access and command over groups of people, those people suffer greatly. And what do? They move. Whites who live in heavily Democratic areas dive bomb out to areas that are controlled by Republicans. Hence the influx of Democrats into Texas. Hence it's been 30, 40 years that Democrats have been leaving New York City and moving down to Florida. They say it's for the warm weather, but the entire southern half of the country has warm weather. They're moving to Florida because at one point it was completely controlled, locked stock and barrel by Republicans. So low taxation, gun ownership. Hey, you're not a felon. You can own a gun. You can carry it. You can also use it to defend yourself without having to worry about us, locking you up. So many things about Florida that make it really beneficial to live in if you're getting on in the years. But the low taxation is the number one reason why people end up there. And so if people are moving to low tax states, which they are, I've covered that. How Money Walks is the book that you need to get by Travis Brown. And that book explains explicitly how people and money flow to low tax areas. And so if it was just one or two instances, like one city in a state or one small region of the United States or one state where low taxes and less regulation and Republican control were the rule of the day, and maybe a few 100,000 people moved there, you could say, oh, it's really the weather, or it's really the sports team, or it's really the business environment. It's not the Republican control and the low taxes. But the fact is, every state that has no property tax on houses or no state tax, those are all the states where they have the biggest numbers of people just pouring in. Tennessee, Florida, Texas. The lower the taxation, the more people move there. And in areas where the taxes are high, California, New York, Illinois, the people are dive bombing out. And the population losses are so great that we're actually seeing shifts in what states ranking there is. So which metropolitan areas are more populous than others. But, please tell me how it was the fact that these media organizations shifted the story away from, the Access Hollywood tape, which nobody gave a hoot, over to the news of the day, which was that the Democrats, when they're amongst themselves in the DNC party leadership and Podesta specifically, but all of them, because it was more than just his emails, it was Donna Brazil's, it was a whole bunch of people. Those individuals, when they're in their private spaces and they're discussing different constituency groups, when they talk about the ones that are not carrying all the water, the Black community carries all of the water for the Democrats. When it's time to turn out and deliver an election, it's the Black community who comes out and does it. Literally putting down their Bibles, stepping out of Bible studies, stepping out of Christian organizations to come out and deliver elections to Democrats when it's needed. When it's crunch time, when it's push time, they run those ads on Black radio and Blacks come out and deliver the election. And in return, highest unemployment rate, highest incarceration rate, highest level of unemployment, lowest ability to complete high school, most number of students percentage-wise who cannot pass grade level metrics to say that they're proficient or advanced for whatever grade, for whatever whatever the test material is, but specifically whether they're on grade level for math, reading, science, the performance is not there. Highest number of children attending school in a building that has subpar performance or is not accredited in a district. Highest number of children attending buildings that have lead paint and a lack of air conditioning. I mean, everywhere you look, Black people are living in conditions that white Democrats would never put up with. The Black people are living in communities that are run by Democrats. The tax base is low. The taxation is high. The value is not there. The crime is high. The illegals are taking the jobs. And still, the Democrats get in their private spaces and say, well, Black policies, we can't do anything for the Black community. We've tried and it doesn't work for them. No, it's not that it doesn't work. It's that your policies stink. So forget Access Hollywood. It's you. Remember? It's not me. It's you. Usually it's not you, it's me. But in this case, it's them, right? Anyway, when we get back, we're going to be hearing from Harry Reid, who thinks the Democrats should stop talking about impeachment. Stay right there.
Physical activity is the new trend. It's not a bad thing unless it has brought a sense of vanity in your life. 2 years ago, I was not happy with the number on the scale, nor how I looked. I've never been a huge person, but I was, as the old folks would say, healthy. I joined a gym, gained a personal trainer, even changed some of my eating habits. The Lord checked me one day and in my spirit said, "Why are you disgusted with yourself? Be healthy, take care of the temple I've loaned you, but do it because you want to honor this body, which is your responsibility while on this earth." I said, "You better let me know, Abba." Psalms 139 verse 14 says, "I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well." 15 pounds down, I know that even if I was to never look like Serena Williams with those nice framed, worked out arms, I am wonderfully made in his image, and so are you. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Victory McIntosh. Connect with us more at urbanfamilytalk.com.
I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk. We desire to be a movement of time tellers. In 1 Chronicles 12:32 it says, "The sons of Issachar were men who had understanding of the time, to know what Israel ought to do." In these perilous times, God is raising up a people of discernment who will see, pray, and act. We sound the alarm as watchmen. We cry aloud that God's people may be activated for his service. Join the movement at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Hi, I'm Mark. After a few years of using drugs began to use me. I heard about Teen Challenge in a jail cell. When I got here, I found lasting freedom. This is the longest I've been sober in 29 years.
If you know an adult or teenager who's struggling with a chemical addiction, Teen Challenge can help. Call us today at 417-581-2181 or reach us online at teenchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
Stacy Washington.
And so to this day, I don't eat green beans. If they bring me a plate of food at a restaurant and they've substituted green beans for some other vegetable because the other vegetable is out of season, I will make them bring me a saucer and remove the green beans from my plate and take them off of the table because I cannot abide green beans. And so Chuck Schumer and the Democrats have to sit down to the table and it's loaded up high with green beans and they have to stay there until they've eaten them all. That's the table they set. They boiled the green beans, they picked them, they snapped them, they put them into the steamer, they've cooked them, they seasoned them with salt and pepper, and now they're on the table with a little side of butter, and that's all they're getting, and they're going to have to eat these until they win.
Stacy on the Right. Weekday afternoons at 2 Central on Urban Family Talk. Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
We don't know if the president will survive this. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. But some Democrats are already talking about impeachment. Assuming the House flips, is there a danger in that? Because that didn't work out so well for the Republicans.
I've been through an impeachment. I was a brand new whip at the time. I'd never sat down in the front row. I mean, the Supreme Court was right ahead of me. Rehnquist was up there, and I felt so nervous. I was right. Everything going on was right in front of me. So I've been through an impeachment, and they're not pleasant. And I think the less we talk about impeachment, the better off we are as a country.
Wow. So you're listening to that voice and you're thinking, who? I recognize. Yes, it's Harry Reid. He's back. And I found this to be fascinating that he was actually on NBC talking about just the ramifications of an impeachment on the entire nation. And it's funny because I've said similar comments here on the show. This is something that everyone's going, well, yeah, we need to impeach him. They're not thinking it through. This happens a lot. A guilty is charged. We've all been there. You're mad. You want something to happen. But then once it starts to happen, you realize, oh no, this is bad for me. It's bad for them. It's bad for everyone involved. And I got to say the voters don't agree with the Democrats on this either. Now, Harry Reid, former, really he was a part of the leadership of the Democrats, and he's saying no, he doesn't think this should happen. A recent NPR poll revealed that 47% of voters would oppose a candidate who wished to impeach President Trump, compared with 42% who would support such a candidate. The poll showed 70% of Democratic voters would back a candidate, who favored impeachment. Now, I find that interesting because the Democrats would not countenance any type of discussion about impeachment about President Obama when he was in office. And they didn't really seem to care that there were some untoward dealings going on, that people died in Benghazi. Who cares? That people died on the border with that whole gun running. Who cares? Nobody cared. So I know it's normal for people who oppose the candidate or the party in power to get worked up like this and to kind of act as if, it's anything goes at any cost. But back when it was the Republicans opposing President Obama, I didn't call for impeachment, and I certainly didn't feel like it was an opposing him at all costs type of a deal. I felt they were too weak standing up to him, but there was never a part of me that wanted to see the country go through something like an impeachment. And it would have only gotten us Joe Biden. So what was the point? Which is what the Democrats haven't considered. What do they expect to get out of Mike Pence? Liberalism? It's not going to happen. So exercise in futility, certainly. So I promised you we were going to talk about China using this social score to stop citizens from flying and using trains. And we'll get to that in just 1 second. But before we talk about that, I want to tell you about, I'm a co-chair of Project 21, and we are under the umbrella of the National Center for Public Policy Research. And that is the organization that I was with yesterday at the White House in the East Wing discussing policy for our upcoming release of the blueprint. And it's exciting. It's exciting. But it's embargoed. So they're on the Hill discussing it today. I'm back here because our son's birthday is today. He's 17 years old. And so we're going to be celebrating with him. And, mom duties come first. As much as I wanted to hang out in Washington, D.C. and go to the Hill for the first time, I'll have my chance to do that later on in the year for gun rights. I'll be on the Hill speaking with legislators, especially the ones from the state of Missouri, and as a part of a group of women, a group of moms who'll be going to D.C. to lobby, not lobby, but to speak on behalf of regular people. And when we go and partake in that, we'll report on it on the program. But this is interesting because we're talking about the Free Enterprise Project, which is also a part of National Center. And they went to the shareholder meeting, and this was yesterday, to confront the president of Bank of America over their decision to sever ties with certain gun manufacturers based on nothing else but the fact that they manufacture guns. Now, are you with me here? Because if you're someone who has Bank of America as a bank, you're thinking, well, what can I do? Because there's been a lot of negative news about different banks and large banks in the country. There is no organization you're ever going to be a part of where there's never any kind of a problem. The smaller organizations do have it easier because when your team is a few hundred people, it's much easier to weed out the bad actors. When you have hundreds of thousands of employees, as Bank of America and other large banks have, you're going to have problems sometimes. But this story is about a decision that was made at the top of the organization. Now, I played the audio for you of one of their leaders at Bank of America talking about how the reaction was not all positive when they started telling their clients that some of their business would not be welcome. Well, it's now Brian Moynihan. He's the Bank of America CEO, and he refused to say at the shareholder meeting how much money investors will lose because of his decision to join those who oppose the Second Amendment. Now, why is this so important? Well, let's say you don't bank at Bank of America, but you're a shareholder. Or let's say you do bank there, but you're a shareholder. The point is, if you are buying stock in Bank of America, a publicly traded company, and you're doing that because you want to make money, then you are definitely going to be interested in what is discussed at the shareholder meeting and whether or not the president of the company that you're investing your money in is making decisions that are detrimental to your investment. And that's what this is about. The CEO of Bank of America is not there to make social policy. He's not there to comment on whether or not this is right or that's wrong. He's there to ensure that people who've invested money in Bank of America, otherwise known as shareholders, are getting a return on their investment. And now, please don't mistake that I feel that he should be breaking the law. No, never. That he should be doing things to flout laws and regulations. No, never. But the Second Amendment is law. It's constitutionally protected rights that are given to us by God that we enjoy under the auspices of our Constitution. So for him to punish people who are engaging in constitutionally protected rights, it just doesn't make sense to me. And imagine if the shoe were on the other foot. If they decided they weren't going to do any business with abortion providers, you know what would happen, don't you? Well, the left would say, how can you punish people for using a constitutionally protected right? Because leftists believe that the Constitution protects and secures the right for women to abort the unborn. Now, I don't agree with that, just like I don't agree with the Supreme Court of the United States enshrining slavery as something that should remain. They did that at one point. So what should Bank of America do? I'm pretty sure they're still doing business with Planned Parenthood. So here we are. You've got Justin Danhoff, who's been on the program before, and he was in Charlotte, North Carolina. He represented the National Center for Public Policy Research. And the quote from him is, Moynihan and Bank of America's leadership team have decided to place liberal virtue signaling ahead of the company's investors. This is a gross violation of the company's fiduciary duty to its investors. If Moynihan wants to lobby against gun rights on his own time, that's one thing, but he instead put Bank of America's significant financial and institutional weight behind a policy movement aimed at harming or abolishing the Second Amendment. By using his position as CEO in such an overtly political manner, he is abdicating his responsibility to act in his company's best interests. He doesn't accurately speak for all of the company's investors and customers, which surely include millions of Second Amendment supporters. So Justin Danhoff noted at the meeting that the company is joining a list of corporations who are following the liberal whim of the moment and not looking at the best interests of their shareholders. And CNBC asked Warren Buffett about corporations distancing themselves from the NRA and gun manufacturers and how Berkshire Hathaway would respond. And Buffett said, I don't believe in imposing my views on our employees and 1 million shareholders. I'm not their nanny on that. I don't think that Berkshire should say we're not going to do business with gun folks. I think that would be ridiculous. And we're talking about Warren Buffett. If there's anybody out there that you want to look to as a kind of example of how to govern yourself when making money, that's a pretty above board guy who is a master at the market. And so he's viewing this from a strictly clinical point of view. What are we looking at here? Shareholder investments. It is my responsibility as the head of this company to protect those investments, not to impose my own personal whims upon the company that might cost money. Interesting, isn't it? So I'm going to post a link to this on the show page over at Facebook, and I'll tweet it out. You can read Justin Danhoff's full question. We're working on getting him onto the program to discuss the other shareholder meetings that he's attending this week. He's actually got a ton of them. And it's interesting because I've done this before once. I attended a shareholder meeting at Arch Coal here locally in St. Louis and asked a question of the president. And at that time, they were under enormous pressure by the Obama administration and Obama's EPA, which eventually drove them into bankruptcy. And it was a really interesting time because there were some activist nuns way over on the other side of the shareholder room. We were in one of those large, it's like an auditorium type thing, like a lecture hall with the seats going down, but it was very posh. And it was a large room, but it wasn't nearly the size of one you'd find at a college. And so you're sitting there and people are asking their questions. And when it was my turn to ask a question, I actually found myself to be nervous. It was my first time doing that. And when I asked him, I saw him, it's you know how it is with powerful people who aren't used to being questioned by strangers or used to having their decisions questioned because they're at the top. It's almost as if they turn their gaze to you, and it's like they're moving their laser view from one person to you. And when their eyes land on you, it's like they're looking straight into your soul. So I'm standing up asking the question. He turns, and when he turned and looked at me, he kind of smiled a little bit. And as I got further into the question, the smile just faded away, but the eyes never moved. And then when he went to answer the question, he kind of it was almost like he just sloughed the question off, and he kind of answered it and kind of didn't, and then moved on. I believe there was only one other question after that, and then he shut the whole thing down. And so it's, obviously it's his purview how many questions he's going to take. It was a fascinating look at speaking to someone like that. But suffice it to say, Justin has been doing this for a while as heading up the Free Enterprise Project. He's been all over the country to these shareholder meetings. And he is also responsible for the apology that Joy Behar actually had to deliver. You'll remember that story from just a few weeks ago when Joy Behar was forced by the head of ABC to apologize because of a question asked by Justin Danhoff to the CEO of Disney. And it was, that was a big deal, not just for the Free Enterprise Project, but for all of us over at National Center. So we were really happy with his ability to get into these spaces and to refocus all of these people back to their primary mission, which is the CEO of a company cares primarily for obviously running the company well, pleasing the board of directors, and making money for shareholders. Impacting policy or becoming a news item, those are not a part of the first three items that I outlined. So that's an interesting bit there. Let's check the time here. Oh yeah, we have just enough time. So actually, I think I'm going to hold over the China using the social score to stop citizens from flying and using trains. So we need a little bit more time to talk about that. We will hold that over to hour 2. I want to give you guys some information. First of all, if you have subscribed to StaceyOnTheRight.com, but you're not opening up the newsletter when it comes out every week, you're missing out on fantastic content that I'm curating and then sending out in the newsletter once a week. This last week, it was all of the best photos from the White House press corps of the president and Mrs. Trump and all of the other, like everywhere they were last week. I had a ton of those in the newsletter. So if you hit the subscribe button and then the newsletter comes to you on Sunday evening, definitely click through and open it and take a look at what I'm sending out to you. Because sometimes it's a column by me. Sometimes it's like this time it was pictures. Other times it's information directly from the White House on some policy initiatives and data that you may think to yourself, well, why do I need to know, how many percentages of Americans did X, Y, or Z? Well, you may not, but you may, because you never know when someone's going to say, he's not doing anything for Americans. And you can say, actually, he kind of is. This happened, this or that. We're talking about one-liners, just good information for you to have that are often in the newsletter. So, and then of course, it's the posts from the week. Any posts that I put up that you might want to be updated on. So definitely hit the subscribe button over there. We have thousands of people now on the list, and it's really fantastic. And we're grateful for you. Thank you so much for doing that. Thanks for tuning into the show. This is hour 1. We have one more hour to go. You are not going to want to miss our next guest. We have Angela Morabito and so much more for you. So stay right there. We have important news and information from One News Now coming up. And then it'll be me again. So be right back.
There's a lot happening around us. That's why Christians need to stand strong on family values and morality. Hi, I'm Ray Rooney, editor of The Stand, a blog from the American Family Association. The Stand has timely, carefully written articles on relevant cultural issues that you can quickly forward to others. Visit afa.net/The Stand.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News on the Hour, I'm Chris Woodward. Here's something to mention at tonight's prayer meeting. One of 2 Texas police officers shot Tuesday outside a Home Depot has died from his wounds. Fox's Evan Brown reports.
Dallas PD officer Rogelio Santander was one of 2 officers shot in what resulted in a long-distance car chase of the suspect. Officer Santander is now dead.
We're asking that you continue to pray for the family and the DPD family.
Dallas Police Chief Renee Hall, a second officer and an employee of the Home Depot store where the incident took place, remain in the hospital in critical condition. The suspect, Armando Luis Juarez, is jailed. His family tells reporters they don't believe he could be the gunman. Eben Brown, Fox News.
It's not fake news. The Supreme Court may rule in favor of President Trump's so-called travel ban. That's according to the Associated Press, based on questions and statements from justices Tuesday. While the travel ban involves a handful of countries like North Korea and Venezuela, the other nations on the list have Muslim-majority populations. And that's not fair, says lead attorney Neil Kachal.
Our nation was founded on a different premise, on the idea that you could come to its shores and be treated fairly. And our immigration laws reflect that, most powerfully in 1965, in saying there shall be no nationality-based discrimination.
Kachal also argued Tuesday that President Trump's tweets before and after his inauguration show a bias against Muslims. Solicitor General Noel Francisco argued in defense of the president's policy, saying that anything President Trump said as a, quote, private citizen should not have relevance on this case.
I think one way you could understand it is that it doesn't go to Article 3 jurisdiction, though it is a justiciability argument, and we would urge this court to accept it because we think it's correct. But even if you don't think that it's correct, we think that this proclamation satisfies the merits because it does fall well within the power of the president under 1182.
Find more on this story at onenewsnow.com. Republican lawmakers have returned to a baseball diamond in Alexandria, Virginia, for the first time since a gunman opened fire on a congressional baseball practice last year. Fox's Rachel Sutherland reports from Washington.
Congressman Barry Loudermilk says he had flashbacks for weeks after James Hodgkinson opened fire, injuring lawmakers and staffers and critically wounding House Majority Whip Steve Scalise.
It was important to come out here and show the world that we're not going to be deterred.
Scalise is still recovering from injuries and was not there today. The practices are held this time each year in advance of the annual Congressional Charity Baseball Game. In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
Jurors in North Carolina are getting a roundup of testimony in a lawsuit filed by neighbors of an industrial-scale swine operation. The 10 plaintiffs contend that open-air cesspools of hog waste inflict intense putrid smells on them that can't be removed from clothing or household fabrics. Lawyers for Virginia-based Smithfield Foods Hog Production Division maintain that the smells, traffic, and noise do not hurt the neighbor's ability to enjoy their own property. The jury has heard 3 weeks of testimony. This is the first of a series of test cases by more than 500 neighbors against the low-cost, high-volume methods used by the Chinese-owned company. Lawyers for the neighbors say alternative methods do not cause such a nuisance, but the company uses open-air cesspools because they're cheap. In final news this hour, a sugar substitute gets a new warning. Fox's Joy Piazza has more and House Call for Health.
If you're sweet on sugar substitutes, a new study may sour your views a bit. Millions of Americans use products like Splenda, Sweet and Low, and Equal. They became popular when health experts warned that we're consuming too much sugar, leading to a rise in weight problems and diabetes. But this new study on rats and human cells finds artificial sweeteners can also add pounds and increase the risk of diabetes. The Food and Drug Administration says the use of Splenda and other sugar substitutes is safe, but should be used in moderation.
That's all our time for this hour. Find more news at onenewsnow.com.
Listen to Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp.
I mean, did you hear that?
Pointed.
Remember that you're not only a Christian on Sunday.
And insightful.
Deception and lies have been accepted as the norm from the Democrats.
But most of all, she's on the right.
That scripture from the Bible, it says the heart of the fool inclines to the left. Just kept popping into my mind.
Stacy on the Right. Now heard weekday afternoons from 2 to 4 Central on Urban Family Talk. Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
By 2020, China plans to give all of its 1.4 billion citizens a personal score based on how they behave. So some people with low scores are already being punished if they want to travel. Nearly 11 million Chinese people can no longer fly, and 4 million are barred from trains. Next week, the program will start expanding nationwide. Ben Tracy is in China with what's behind the government's scoring system. Ben, this sounds like scary stuff. Good morning.
Good morning. The government here says it is trying to purify society by rewarding those who are trustworthy and punishing those who are not. So like the credit score that most Americans get for how they handle their finances, Chinese citizens are now getting social credit scores based on everything from whether they pay their taxes on time to how they cross the street.
How they cross the street. Welcome back to Stacy on the Right here on Urban Family Talk, American Family Radio. UrbanFamilyTalk.com is the website, and also AFR.net for the radio side. And I think this is fascinating only because we as Americans probably couldn't imagine being told that we couldn't buy a plane ticket because taxes weren't paid on time. Yet that's what's happening here. That's what these people are experiencing. I actually think it's kind of crazy. But this is what the Chinese people have to deal with. It's communism. So here are the details. And Reuters is reporting on this, MSN.com. It sounds like it's some kind of hoax, but it's not. It's real. So there's a way they're going about doing this. They talk about online financial transactions, and Alibaba is, I guess, a part of this. And so they're using a different kind of a system from the credit reporting system. Remember, we use the credit reporting system in which past financial information is used to determine whether or not you will pay things on time in the future. And it's about mortgages and credit card bills, the kind of things that, like, having a mortgage is not a necessity in and of itself. You can always rent. But if you want to own a home, then you have to show yourself credit worthy so that you can borrow the amount of money that you would need to buy it. So China is taking the whole concept a few steps further by building an omnipotent social credit system that's meant to rate each student's. I'm talking about students because we have ones here, and I guess it's on my mind. An omnipotent social credit system that's meant to rate citizens' trustworthiness. So by 2020, everybody in China will be enrolled in a vast national database that compiles their fiscal and government information, minor traffic violations, and distills it into a single number that ranks each citizen. Now, it's not fully in place yet, but they're now watching how 8 Chinese companies issue their own social credit scores under the state-approved pilot program. Now, this is pretty fascinating. One of the most high-profile projects is by Sesame Credit, the financial wing of Alibaba. They have 400 million users, and they're the world's biggest online shopping platform. They use their unique database of customer information to compile individual social credit scores. Users are encouraged to flaunt their good credit scores to friends and even potential mates. China's biggest matchmaking service, called Beihe, has teamed up with Sesame to promote clients with good credit scores, giving them prominent spots on the company's website. If that doesn't kind of cause your eyebrows to go north, then let's go on. A person's appearance is very important, is the explanation given by Beihe's vice president, Zhuan Yurong. It's more important to be able to make a living, though. Your partner's fortune guarantees you a comfortable life. More and more of Beihe's 90 million clients are displaying their credit scores in their dating profiles, doing away with the idea that the credit score is a private matter. So they're putting it on their profile, as if to say, not only is my picture cute, but check it out, I'm good with my money too. So Sesame Credit does not divulge exactly how they calculate the credit scores. They say it's a complex algorithm. They've issued a statement discounting persistent rumors that they monitor users' social media activity to assess their social credit. They say at Sesame Credit that they actually track financial and consumption activities of the users, and materials published on social media platforms do not affect their users' personal Sesame Credit score. Now, I tend to believe none of that. If it's out there and it's information about you and they have a way to track it and to include it in the algorithm, why wouldn't they? Of course, that's what they're doing. And the reason I don't believe it is because Facebook always says they're not doing X and they really are doing it. And then later when we find out they're really doing it, they say, yeah, but we're sorry about that. We'll have to do better next time. And then they just do some more of the same thing. Now, they don't hide that they judge the types of products that their users purchase online. So not only do they obtain data from partners, including the taxi service Didi Kuidi, rating their users on whether or not they paid their taxi bills, but they also look at what you've purchased, meaning someone who's played video games for 10 hours a day would be considered an idle person. Someone who frequently buys diapers would possibly be considered a parent who on balance is more likely to have a sense of responsibility. The Chinese authorities are watching the pilot process really carefully because their system won't be exactly the same as the private system. But the government officials are certainly taking their cues from the algorithms that were developed under the private projects. Now, they have a lengthy planning document. China's elite state council explains therein that social credit will forge a public opinion environment that trust keeping is glorious. So they describe their upcoming project in the superlative, glorious. They warn that the new system will reward those who report acts that breach trust. So they're going to turn all of the citizens into policing agents. Report on the poor behavior choices of your neighbors, and they'll probably give them credits as well. Credit, bump ups and scores, what have you. So the details are vague. It's clear that citizens will be rated. Also, organizations will be rated. A long list of people in certain professions will face especially particular scrutiny under this new plan, including teachers, accountants, journalists, and medical doctors, veterinarians, and even tour guides. The national database will merge a wide variety of information on every citizen, assessing whether taxes and traffic tickets have been paid, whether academic degrees have been rightly earned, and whether or not women have been instructed to take birth control. So I got to say, it sounds like a nightmare. It sounds like something out of a dystopian movie that we may or may not have seen. What's that one with Tom Cruise where as he's first he's a policeman and then something happens like a murder and he's framed for it. And as he's running away, the ads that he sees are specifically tailored to him. And then they put it into the system that he's wanted. And everyone is told in their little visual cortexes to look for him. And so everywhere he is, the advertising software recognizes him. And then everyone who's nearby is alerted that he's there. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that nightmares are made out of. Instead of your friends and your neighbors being your friends and neighbors, they're potentially reporting that you spent too much time watching TV or you've chosen not to take birth control. Amazing that would be something that the government would feel like they needed to even be aware of. But then in China, you are only allowed to have one child, or I think it's maybe two now. So the other scary fact about this is that they feel like tracking you on this stuff when many people in China don't even have houses or cars or credit cards. So it's not even available to measure. They have financial data from 800 million of their citizens, but only 320 million of them have a traditional credit history. Now, what does that say about a country of over 1 billion people, that only 800 million of the 1 billion plus have financial data? And then another 320 million of those same people, carve out 320 million of them, they're the only ones that have a traditional credit history. So everybody outside of that 320 million, they're not living like Americans. So we take for granted that they even have access to these types of things because that's what we're used to. But they're not. So Wen Quan says that credit systems build trust between all citizens. I mean, I just wow. So that what they're doing is they're putting this up there as like an incentive. So this one couple that's highlighted in the story, they're in a trendy neighborhood in downtown Beijing, so they have money. They're in the group that already have credit. They have their Sesame credit ratings proudly displayed on their mobile phones. It's very convenient. We booked a hotel last night using Sesame credit, and we didn't need to leave a cash deposit. So most of the people who have been told about this didn't even know that a bad score could hurt them in the future, that they couldn't receive a bank loan or sign a lease. And more concerning, they didn't even know they were being rated at all. So right now, the pilot credit system is voluntary, though you can't really get away from it. And online shopping is a part of life in modern Chinese cities, and Alibaba's financial payment service is ubiquitous. Kind of like, it's the thing that you use to pay. So I think it's one thing to have credit scoring. And I think it's problematic here in this country because people who fall into hard times can have their credit score negatively impacted. And it doesn't have to be that they're bad credit risk. It can be that they had a rough go. They've had a rough period where they haven't had a job or something like that. Things have been negative. And then when they get back on their feet, they're still unable to get people to trust them to do, simple transactions like banking, things like that. But there is a path out of that here in this country. But with this, since they're rating you socially, the very existence of a social rating system then encourages more surveillance. If they're already rating you on your social credit, why shouldn't they create something called marital credit and rate you on that? What about parenting credit? They can rate you on your parenting. The more you rate and the more you screen, the more you'll want to. And for people who are doing well, they'll proudly display their ratings. And for people who are doing poorly, well, they won't, which in and of itself is a statement and proof that you're not doing well, because people who are doing well at it will want to share. The other thing that it reminds me of is the way Facebook is. They've gotten so huge and they have so much control that what they do is they just decide what content they want seen and what they don't want seen, and they reward people that they like and they punish people that they don't like. And they do that by allowing certain things to show up and not allowing other things to show up by, different actions that they take. They can do that because they monopolize the marketplace. The only recourse for the user is to simply no longer use it. Sounds pretty simple, except that there isn't a viable alternative. So anyway, that was I thought that was a pretty fascinating story. Call lines are open. We would love to chat with you if you want to call in. It's 866-963-2037. And we also, I'm so excited to get to speak with our next guest. And she's been on the program before. And we've chatted and had a good time talking about standunited.org. And she's going to be on with us again, Angela Morabito. And we're going to be talking about their next big thing they have going on. And so I want to encourage you, if you're watching on Periscope or perhaps YouTube or whatever, share the show. Hit the share button. Let people know you're watching the program. And if you're listening on terrestrial radio, which I know that's going on all over the country, you want this show on your radio channel, your Christian radio channel, your talk radio station, send a link to one of the different broadcasts that we're doing, YouTube, whatever. Send a link to urbanfamilytalk.com/Stacy over to your program director for that station and just say, hey, I'm a listener and I'd love to see this here. They like hearing from you. So do that for us. We'd really appreciate that. Now, some music. We'll be right back with more. We'll have our guests for you from standunited.org. Stay right there.
Okay, so the big question for any decision you're going to make, is this actually going to work? Well, if you've heard about MediShare, which is a brilliant way of sharing healthcare costs, you may have wondered that. Does it work? Well, so did Dr. Stuart Hoover, who initially joined to save a lot of money. The typical family saves about $500 a month. Stuart saved even more.
When we first joined MediShare, we were immediately going from a little over $1,600 a month down to $460 basically a month.
So that's wonderful, but then his wife needed emergency surgery, and the bills added up to $160,000.
So we were seeing the bills coming in, and then the bills were being paid. Portions were being shared, and the end result of this is this bill was taken care of.
Yes, MediShare works, and it's so easy to get your questions answered too, so why not? You can call right now, 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. I'll never forget the shock and fear that hit my family when my oldest sister, Elena, was diagnosed with an aggressive form of breast cancer. We truly wrestled with fear. Thoughts like, are we going to lose her? How long does she have? What's the prognosis? All of these questions crowded out our other more mundane concerns. More often than not, fear is our first response to life's crises and challenges. Fear is born out of uncertainty. It's a sense of danger. Things are not predictable. We don't see this coming. We haven't been through this before. We don't know what's going to happen, and it strikes fear in our hearts. You know what? We must reject fear's paralyzing control. Listen to these tender instructions from Psalm 34, verses 4 through 7. I sought the Lord, and he answered me and delivered me from all my fears. They looked to him and were radiant. Their faces shall never be ashamed. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and rescues them. You see, when fear strikes our hearts, number one, we need to stop and seek the Lord. The psalmist says, I sought the Lord. Seek God right now. Ask for his special presence in your predicament. Then secondly, embrace his concern. Verse 6 says, the poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all his troubles. Finally, draw strength from his presence. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and rescues them. He'll strengthen you to face whatever danger you fear. Here's what I want you to remember today. God is with you, and he is greater than all your fears. No matter what you're facing, he is with you.
Join Crawford Loritz tomorrow for another Legacy Moment.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. At Stacy on the Right on Twitter and Instagram. Hit the follow button. Check out the content. Thanks so much for being with us today. It's my pleasure to welcome Angela Morabito, Senior Campaign Organizer for StandUnited.org. Angela, thanks for joining us today.
Hi,
Stacey. Thanks for having me on the show.
It's always good to talk to you. I'm just chomping at the bit for the latest update.
Great. So there's a ton of great stuff going on at Stand United. First and foremost is a pop culture petition. Turns out the conservatives watch TV too, and they're pretty sick and tired of not seeing themselves represented. So the Roseanne reboot was like super successful, like smashed every ratings expectation that the network had. Well, now almost 4,000 people are signed the petition to bring back Last Man Standing. It's that sitcom where Tim Allen played a conservative dad living in the suburbs with his family, and people just found that really relatable. So they're trying to make that ABC's next reboot.
Okay, I'm there for that. Because, okay, so here's my thing. Angela, I never watched it before that. Because, so network TV, we're kind of over it here at our house, and we watched Netflix, which we've let Netflix go. Now we're on PureFlix because we keep having to kind of eject these different platforms that kowtow to liberals. And so at the time I found out that Last Man Standing was a fantastic thing, it was because everyone was talking about it being canceled. So I never really got to partake of it before that. So now that the Roseanne reboot has been so successful, which coincidentally, I went back and watched some of the episodes from the original because they're free to live stream on Amazon if you're a Prime member. And I got to say, I'd say 50% of the episodes are so sad because they're meant to be funny, but they're sad statements on what Roseanne thought of working class people back then when the show first ran. But as I understand it now, they've come back and it's supposed to be pretty funny. But I wanted to reorient myself before I watched the newer episodes. So I've got that going on. And now you're talking about this petition for Last Man Standing, which I'm totally like, I want to see that. I think Tim Allen has always been funny. Remember when he was the home improvement guy? He was amazing.
Yes, of course. I mean, was just such a classic American show. And I think people look at Tim Allen as like one of the last few celebrities who's like good, clean, fun, scandal-free. At least relatively within recent decades. So I think people are really hungry for that. And, of course, these networks are thinking, well, why doesn't middle America watch our shows? It's not because we don't care about entertainment. It's because entertainment hasn't really cared about us.
In a big way, in a big, huge way. So do you think that it's going to have an impact? I mean, they like making money. They like their ideology more, but they do like to make money. Will it matter?
I think that it will. I mean, companies like ABC that are, these huge multinationals, they spend a bucket load of money trying to figure out what people want to watch. Well, now we're effectively doing them a service and saying, hey, we're here. This is what we'd like to see. It's a big deal. And the market responds to that. When we start hitting 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 signatures, that's when we're going to go turn this into ABC and say, hey, over here, we really want to watch your stuff. Will you let us do that? Market forces are kind of determining another petition we have running. Totally different topic. This one is about repealing the 11% tax on ammunition. A lot of gun owners and people who like to hunt, to shoot targets, they don't realize that ammunition is so expensive because the government has baked on an 11% additional cost.
Okay, so let's talk about the ammo tax. So this is why we love having you on, Angela, because I don't believe I've been informed. What state is this in, and how dare they?
Absolutely. Well, unfortunately, it covers all 50 states. This is Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Regulation, that there's an 11% ammo tax. And this petition, the people who wrote it, he's a businessman in Kansas, but he's asked not to be identified. But he's got a really, really cool idea, and you can see his thought process with starting this petition because the ammo tax is used to fund preservation of public lands. Great cause, right? Like sporting hunters especially want those public lands preserved. All he's saying is just find the money somewhere else. We just had tax day. We know we've just given the government a whole lot of money. Why tax the ammo?
They're getting more than their fair share. I mean,
exactly.
They are really raking it in, and they're doing what with it exactly? And what are they really doing
Right.
with it? So it's already, how long has this been going on? I've been paying this all along. I just didn't realize it.
That's about right. The ammo tax has been around for a while now. I'm not sure exactly how long, but it's certainly not within the past few years that this has been a part of every ammo purchase you make, whether you're at a gun range, whether you're buying from, a sporting goods store, back when sporting goods stores used to sell guns and ammo before they all got woke and decided to stop selling. But it's baked into the cost.
Okay, I'm actually feeling a little depressed by what you just shared. Like, that's not okay. I didn't know I was paying a gun ammo tax. I did not know that. That's no good. That's no good for me. I don't like it.
The government is really not transparent about it, so consumers like you, and frankly, I didn't know either until someone came to us with this petition, and now it's, wow, people who use their Second Amendment rights are effectively taxed on it.
Okay, all right. On to the next petition. That one's got me a little bit. I was jazzed about your first petition. The first one that's awesome. This one, the chance of repealing a tax is so slim, we might as well, like that is not something that happens a lot with our government. Maybe we should have a list of all the taxes that have been repealed so we can encourage ourselves, but the list is probably so small. What would even be on it?
That's a really good idea. I mean, a lot has passed within just this latest tax reform package where the medical device tax from the Obama era finally goes away. Why would you look at someone who needs a prosthetic arm or a hearing aid or, a certain type of wheelchair? Why would you tax that? They're making money off of the most vulnerable, and fortunately, that tax is no more. It's gone away. So that's a big win.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess now we'll go to, and I already put the link to Last Man Standing petition in the show link on the page, so people can click on that and they can join in. President Trump wants to end the American trade surrender. Don't block him. Oh, that's from March 7th. What are the more recent ones?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?
Well, I'm looking on your page and I see a bunch of, I see you have petition for American media to stop David Hogg's 15 minutes of fame. And you,
right.
Yeah.
Right. People petition for all kinds of different issues. Nothing is too big or too small. Someone came to us and wanted to petition for more beneficial trade policies, and that's where the surrender petition comes in. They say that America isn't getting a fair shake on the world stage. Hopefully it'll start getting more fair, more beneficial to us after President Trump's meeting with French President Macron over the past several days. Now, the petition to end David Hogg's 15 minutes of fame, that was sent to us, and of course, we know that David Hogg has a right to free speech. He's now legally an adult, and, I feel like he ought to be treated like one, right? So people also have the right to use their free speech to say, he's antagonizing companies. He's trying to lead boycotts. He's just trying to be destructive, and it's not going to stop gun violence. There are productive things he could do, and he's not doing them. So the David Hogg petition is particularly interesting for the reasons for signing that people give. People have all kinds of different reasons to say that he's going about this the wrong way.
Yeah, I tend to think so as well. So for me, for the David Hogg stuff, really, it's either he's a public figure and he's out in the public eye, and the reason for him being there is that he wants to comment on, social policy surrounding guns and the constitutional right to bear arms, et cetera, et cetera. And if he's doing that, then he's in the arena with the adults, and he's very close to, the age of majority himself. And so be it. Have at it. Come into the arena. Let's talk. But for him to sometimes say, well, I'm only 17, I'm a child, but then the next sentence he's dropping the F-bomb and he's telling people that they're killing kids, he can't have it both ways. And so accordingly, I just don't have anything I refuse to deal with him, because if he's a child, then I use my child policy, which is when children approach me on social media and things like that, and they want to engage, I always tell them to get their parents, because I'm not going to debate or argue with a child. And if he's a 17-year-old child, then I'm not going to be, it's a waste of my time.
Right. So he is actually 18. He announced on Twitter a big celebration that he is now able to legally vote. He'll be able to vote in the midterms. And he's trying to get other people to do the same. Now, I have no problem with an effort to get out the vote. But just recently in the news, voter registration of new young voters in Parkland and the counties surrounding that area has not been there's been no increase from past midterm election years. If he's trying to rally people to register to vote, it's just not working. Also, he's 18. He wants to be treated he wants to have the respect that we give adults, but he wants to be treated like a child, and you just can't have it both ways. I
totally agree. So let's give out the information. So if people want to join in on the petitions, and I encourage people to do this, it works when you have thousands of people signed up on a petition. The people who are really interested in that take notice, and they want to see the opinions of the people who've joined together to sign. So I think the last man standing one, out of all the ones we've talked about today, it sticks out the most to me because it's an opportunity to have something positive on television. And I've been so hopeless about television of late. Like just these past couple of weeks, I felt like, there's less and less of it that's worth my time, which means obviously there's so much other stuff for me to do, so much to read, et cetera, but it'd be nice to have something that was clean and funny to sit down and watch as a family, instead of having to go back 10, 20, 30 years for shows, just to find something that's okay to watch.
Right. I mean, this is a really positive use of free speech and the free market. Hollywood likes to ignore the right. Well, the right is a whole lot of people in this country. So when they don't represent normal, everyday conservatives, and especially conservative families, they're losing out on a huge audience, and an audience that would love to see something relatable and clean and fun on television.
Absolutely. So what's the website and also Twitter if people want to join you and sign petitions and get in on this good stuff?
Awesome. So the website is standunited.org. You can also find us as Stand United on Facebook or standunited.org on Twitter. But the main website is standunited.org. We have links to all of our social media there. We post a bunch on Facebook. We're using Twitter and Instagram now, too. So wherever you get your media, you'll be able to find us. And you can even sign petitions from your phone. So we're completely mobile accessible. Again, that's standunited.org.
I love it. Angela Morabito. And also thank you for working with me on scheduling to get you on today. It's just been such a whirlwind, but I wanted to talk to you. I was so excited to see you on the schedule. So you worked with us to work this out, and it's really great.
Thank you. This was my pleasure, Stacey. Thank you so much. It's always great to talk with you.
All right, we'll talk again soon. And that's standunited.org. Yeah, standunited.org. You can check it out, sign up for the petitions, and they have some great content over there. I'm on the page right now. And so we have now a little bit of time. I want to circle back around because there's a special election that occurred, and you wouldn't know it because guess what? The Democrat didn't win, so it's not getting covered. I mean, it's getting a little bit of coverage. The kind of coverage is kind of like, yeah, it's okay that the Republican won because it shows that the Democrats are winning. That kind of coverage. So let's listen to number 5.
Wow. All I can say is, wow, this is really something. I'm going to be a congresswoman. Woo-hoo! I've really come a long way, and this is really quite overwhelming. It's very surreal. 25 years ago, I left an abusive husband, and I sure as heck never would have dreamt in a million years that I would be running for Congress and be a congresswoman. I mean, wow. That's right. Now I don't say running for Congress. I won. This is awesome. But seriously, life takes us on journeys, and this is an incredible journey.
So You were just listening to the victory speech of Debbie Lesko. She's a Republican from Arizona. She just won her congressional special election. It was in the Arizona's 8th district, and it is a district that President Trump won by a 25-point margin back in 2016, and Mitt Romney won that same district by a 21-point margin in 2012. According to those numbers, she should have won the district by a much larger margin than she did, and that is why the Democrats are saying, well, we're making gains in Arizona. But guess what? It's only recently been this red district. Remember, this is the same district that was once owned in its entirety by Gabrielle Giffords. She held the seat from 2006 to 2012. And in 2012, there was a special election where Ron Barber, who was also a Democrat, he took the seat. The district has changed hands a total of 5 times in the last 25 years, and only 3 of those 5 times did it change into the hands of a Republican. Now, Trent Franks, when he won the district he was elected in 2012, and it was much higher in 2015, over 50%. He didn't face a Democratic challenger in 2 of his 3 elections. So as you heard her say, she was a battered wife. She really had a rough go. And then she's come back from all of that to be a congresswoman. So she's going to be walking the halls of Capitol Hill with that experience under her belt. And I really wish her the best, especially since this is such an accomplishment for her. A single-digit margin of victory means she fought it all the way home. And that's to be respected. And, if she was a Democrat who was also a battered woman, they would be all over this. She'd be everywhere on the Today Show, everywhere else. They'd be interviewing her. But since she's a Republican, hey, doesn't matter. Well, it matters to me. Congratulations, Congresswoman Lesko. All right, we'll be back with more after this. Stay there.
Yo, what's up?
Hey, nothing much, man. Just trying to listen to this last song for the music final.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna fail for the most part. I haven't even listened to it.
Ugh, yeah, me neither. I've been too busy listening to The Word on the Street.
The Word on the Street?
Wait, you guys haven't heard?
No, I haven't heard of it.
Me.
Not that one.
Well, check this out.
There is only one true word, and that is the Word of God, which is what you will hear on Word on the Street, hosted by me, Victory McIntosh. Tune in as we discuss some of the latest hot topics and life issues and filter them all through the holy Word of God. It is possible to live righteous before the Lord and enjoy doing it. Tune in Saturday mornings at 9 Central Time. You don't want to miss it.
We need you to call your senators today. Tell them to put an end to the liberals' filibuster, switch to a majority vote, and defund Planned Parenthood. Your call will make a difference. Call the Capitol switchboard at 202-224-3121 or go to afaaction.net. Again, call 202-224-3121 and tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fold because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Quarter, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk.
Equipped with Chris Brooks.
This program is an apologetic endeavor. What I want to do is really train you in the art and science of defending and commending your Christian faith to people who maybe they've been hurt by the church, maybe they don't believe like you believe, and you're saying to yourself, how do I have an effective conversation with them? Well, we're looking for an evangelistic edge, if you will, that will allow us to more effectively, more contextualize the gospel so that we can reach men and women for Christ. Quite often, the on-ramp, if you will, is looking at culture and taking advantage of the conversations that folks are already having and saying, how can I leverage this to get people to talk about Jesus? This show becomes kind of massively significant to you if your desire is to reach people for Christ.
Get equipped with Chris Brooks.
Join me Monday through Friday at noon Central Time on Urban Family Talk.
This is Spacey on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Former FBI director. I want to play this clip, this sort of notorious clip. Well, it made an impression. Take a listen to this.
Okay, all right.
Congressman, can you tell us anything about the discussion?
No, it's classified and we can't tell you anything. All I can tell you is the FBI director has no credibility. Yes.
That was during the transition. It was a briefing that Director Comey gave to members of Congress, which is classified, which I guess you cannot speak about still.
That's right.
But you and Donald Trump do agree on that. That sentence you said, the FBI director has no credibility.
Absolutely not.
You and Donald Trump are in agreement on that.
I tried to clarify that and to say, yes, coming out of that classified briefing, I said that, and I certainly meant it. However, I think it is quite different when you take a look at Comey and his relationship to the president, what he said, what he's done. I believe him.
You believe him?
I believe him, yes. And so then was then, and now is now.
I just can't stop laughing. I'm sorry. I can't stop laughing because she came out, and you guys remember I played this on the air. We played it on the air. She said, the FBI director has no credibility. She was so upset about it. She was just like enraged, but she's older and she's kind of, she's ladylike. So she was like, he has no credibility. Then she's on this interview and she's laughing so hard she can't stop laughing at herself. And so she's talking about it and he plays the audio for her and she's laughing while it's playing because she finds it just as funny as I do. It's herself. She's literally open mouth laughing. Like she's really getting a kick out of it that he's playing this audio for her. And then she's like, yeah, but I believe him now. So there it is. Enjoy it. just enjoy it. That's all we can do. We don't have any other choice here because she didn't take the time. She didn't say, well, at the time, no. She's just like, well, I believe him now. I believe him now. She believes him now because he's saying things that she likes. She didn't believe him then because he was saying things that she didn't like. And that's really it. That's all it is. I'm sorry. I hope people don't think there's something else because there's nothing else. Just nothing. There's nothing. So there it is. So I don't know if you guys caught it, but I was on Fox Business last night from Washington, D.C., and it was so much fun. So it was a day of firsts. You guys know, I don't mind telling you again, though. I've been to the White House a few times. And this trip yesterday, I was at the White House, again, in the East Wing. And we were actually adjacent to a room that has a restroom in it. It's a big paneled, beautiful, beautiful room. And it has a restroom in it. And that's where the kids, actually one of the kids had to use the restroom the last time we were there as a family. And we were in that hallway in that room. And they went in and he had us just sit around in there while our youngest daughter went to the restroom. And then when we came out, Bo the dog was being walked by his special person. And the kids got to meet Bo the dog. This is back when President Obama was in office. And so this time we entered into that same portico and we were in that same hallway. But instead of being in that room, we were across the hall. And so when the staffer went to open the door and we walked through, I started laughing and having a good time because I was yet again on a first, which was going into this particular area of the White House. Because, my thing is, my bucket list is that I get to go there and I'm on a special tour And then I get to just roam around and be like, yo, what's up in here? And then just go in and say, hello, hello. Just walk around and look. I don't want to touch anything. I only want to take if there's any more of those special White House chocolates. I got some of those. You have to look on Instagram. They're in a teensy weensy little paper container, navy blue, the White House navy blue. And they have President Donald Trump's signature on them in gold leaf. And inside are all of these little chocolate Hershey's Kisses. And they have the White House navy blue foil on them. It's super, super awesome. So I had some of those. I was able to take 2 of those home with me. They're gifts for people who visit. So we were in one of the offices in that area. And we went into there's an office for this official, and then there's a conference room, kind of like a meeting room with a smaller desk in it. And so we went in there and we sat around the conference table and talked about the blueprint and what we're hoping that the White House and the other agency heads will come alongside us with it. And then we left. And of course, they didn't let me run around. So that's the thing. It's a serious place. So as much as you might want to just run around and do whatever you want, you just can't. It's just not that you just don't get to do what you want. So we left. And of course, that's the entrance and exit that's over across from the Treasury building. And it was a different area that I was leaving out of. So I was excited about that because whenever I get to go in and out of a different area, I'm like, woohoo, And so it was just really fun to get to go. We had a serious meeting, but it was wrapped up in a lot of fun camaraderie. I got to meet. So Project 21 has 3 co-chairs. I'm one. And then we've got Niger Ennis, who happens to be an archbishop as well as a constable for his area in Pennsylvania. So he's both law enforcement and a man of the clergy. So I've met him before many times, and he's a wonderful, brilliant, brilliant man. And then, of course, Horace Cooper, who happens to be an attorney and other things that he does he's got his own business. He's an entrepreneur. And so he's also a public policy expert. And he's often on Laura Ingraham and other shows on Fox News. And so I'd never met Horace before. We've talked on the phone. We've done conference calls. We've emailed, but we've never met in person. So we all got to talking. And of course, David Ridner, who is the president and CEO of National Center for Public Policy Research. So it was all of us sitting. We had just a quick meeting at the Starbucks. We sat outside. It was kind of rainy and drizzly. We took our 1.5-mile walk around all the entry points and finally were able to gain access. And it was a great time. And then afterwards, I went straight from there. I caught a car from Fox News. They sent one over to pick me up right from the White House. And I went straight over to Fox's DC bureau. And I got to go in, and I didn't get to meet him, but I saw Ed Henry in person. I also saw the offices of a lot of people who are Fox News contributors. They have offices there. And so I was walking down the hallway and the doors, and I was seeing all the names on the doors. And then I got to do a remote from there to New York for the Making Money with Charles Payne program. And we were talking about the Yeti cooler thing, where Yeti Coolers has decided that they're no longer going to donate to the charitable arm of the National Rifle Association. And I had a few words to say about it. So I did that. And then I took the same car to the airport, and I was literally, yes, that was me. If you were at DCA yesterday, you saw me running in my cute dress and tights and my little leather jacket with my one carry-on bag in my purse, running down the hallway with my boots off. I actually had taken them off at the security checkpoint. And once I got through the TSA, instead of putting them back on, I kept them off and ran down to my flight and actually was still able to board in the A group, which is what my boarding pass said, even though I had to run. Adventuresome. I know. You guys have got to be like, what were you doing? That's what I was doing. I was running through the airport. It was not nearly as glamorous as it looks on TV. It was actually, I was mortified, but I had to get there because I wanted to make that direct flight back here to St. Louis so that I could be here for our son's birthday today. So he's 17. And you guys know we just have the one boy. We have 2 girls, but we have one boy. And I tell you what, it's such a privilege to be a mom. And it's such a privilege to have the little crop of my little crew that I've got going on over here. I'm so grateful. And it's really hard to believe that he's 17 years old. I promise you, I can close my eyes at any point, at any time I can close my eyes, and I am back there. He is like 11 months old, and he's got on a footed sleeper thing. And, he's sitting on my lap and we're reading books or we're laying, down listening to music or whatever. And he's a baby. Yet when I see him, he's looking me directly in the eye because he's tall. He's got a mustache. He's got a super deep voice. And he's a great guy. So I'm so excited that it's his birthday. But I just don't even know where those years went. So if you have those small kids, people say this all the time. And when you're a mom of small kids, you're like, how can I enjoy this time? It's when everybody's making a mess and people are having trouble controlling their bodily fluids. And, there's more kids than there are of me. How can I enjoy this moment? You have to just every day for a couple of minutes, stop and just hug and squeeze the tiny little people or listen to them tell you something with their teensy weensy little voices, because you will wake up. Sometimes I wake up right here. I get up and as I'm getting up, I think to myself, I'll hear one of them talking. I'm like, I can't believe they're this big. And it's all of them because our kids are really close together in age. And so you just glance around and you're like, everybody in the house is a grown up. And I have other friends of mine who told me, they're like, now you're like sands of time zone because you're going to wake up and they're all going to be gone at college. And I'm like, thank you. Thanks for making that sound terrible. I'm glad that they're going to go off and do good things, but it's really a time to just say, you know what? Thank you, Lord. Thank you for these kids. Thank you for this time. It's a lot of fun when they're small. It's been a lot of fun with them as teenagers. It's even more fascinating now because I get to hear from them on things that happen, things that happen in class or people that they meet or news stories. Sometimes they will say, what did you think about this news story? Or what did you think about that news story? And there's actually a documentary about the rampant spring break sex culture. And we're going to watch it. And then I'm going to bring you the information on it right here to the program. I might even have a few audio clips for you, depending on what I can find that's safe for our Christian programming. It's not something that I would recommend you have your 14 or 13-year-old watch, but maybe your 15-year-old, if they're mature enough and they have the understanding of the kind of sexual content that's included. I actually had the recommendation was given to us to watch it, the entire congregation, by our pastor. And as soon as I saw he had just a little bit of video, just a teensy bit, as soon as I saw it, I'm like, I do not want to watch that, because it's an expose on what spring break culture has become. And if you're like me, if you're in the years, you probably remember going on trips to spring break. I remember one year when I was in college, we went to, I think we went to Daytona Beach, and it was kind of bad, but it wasn't as bad as the trailer that I saw of this thing. And I'm not even sure. I'm not sure if the pastor had a clip of it. I know I've seen a trailer since he recommended that we watched it. And in the trailer, the stuff in the trailer is enough to curl the ends of your hair. But so that means the entire thing is pretty rough. So I'll definitely be bringing some information on that after we get a chance to watch it, which won't be today because it's my son's birthday. We're not going to do documentaries on his birthday. But when I've had a chance to watch it, which I hope is before the end of the week, I'll bring you some audio clips if I can find some, and kind of just a little bit of analysis on it. And whether or not I think it's worth the time. I'm pretty sure it is. Our pastor's really great about recommending things that are worth the time. And then we can kind of discuss the content that's therein. And I want to give you some resources for parents of teens and preteens that you can use in your discussions, because one thing we can't do as parents in this day and age is run away from what's going on in the culture. The fact is, you can be clean, upright, living well. And it matters, but it doesn't insulate your children from being exposed to pornography, sexual promiscuity, and just the cultural norms that exist right now. He was talking about The Shape of Water winning an award, an Oscar, or whatever, Emmy, whatever the movie award is, Oscar, and how it celebrates depravity. You've got this alien and it falls in love with a woman and there's torture and there's all this other stuff. I had to kind of listen intently because I didn't go see it. I knew it wasn't my cup of tea, so I just didn't go see the movie. So our kids haven't seen it either, but it doesn't mean that they're not getting the messages from the movie in other places, which is why we have to talk to them about this stuff. We have to know how to talk to them about it, which is just person to person, real. Kids understand that they're kids, but they still want to be spoken to like they're sentient beings. So we just talk to them about it. So I'll bring you all of that. And then I'm holding over on the story, the premature baby left to die alone in a British hospital, and also the Smallville actress Allison Mack charged with sex trafficking. We'll do both of those coming into the show tomorrow. We ran out of time today, but it's good stuff. God bless you. Have a great night. Back here tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of Urban Family Talk, Urban Family Communications, or American Family Association.
Urban Family Talk. Urban Family Talk.
Secular progressives in the United States have worked to alter the very nature of our republic.
For the progressives, there are no longer any God-given natural rights.
AFA Executive Vice President Ed Vitagliano helps you understand the
history of the American Family Association.
For American Family News on the Hour, I'm Chris Woodward.